In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war and secrets. Warhammer 40,000 isn't just about bolters and battlefields. It's a universe haunted by questions that span 60 million years of history. Some mysteries define the very fabric of reality. Others lurk in deliberately erased records. Today, we're diving into the 10 biggest, most lore-dense enigmas that make the 41st millennium truly terrifying. The beauty of Warhammer 40k lies not in what we know, but in what we don't. These aren't simple plot holes or forgotten details. These are universe-defining mysteries that even the most dedicated lore scholars debate endlessly. From the Emperor's ancient bargains with chaos to threats originating beyond our galaxy, these secrets shape everything we see on the tabletop and in the novels. Some have been partially revealed, sparking controversy among fans. Others remain frustratingly, tantalizingly vague. Let's begin with perhaps the most infamous mystery of all. The Lost Primarchs, Legions 2 and 11. 20 Primarchs were created by the Emperor. 18 are accounted for. 9 loyal, 9 traitor. But 2 were completely erased from Imperial records with such thoroughness that even 10,000 years later, we only know them as the Forgotten and the Purged. Their very names are lost to history. Here's what makes this mystery so compelling. These weren't just forgotten casualties of the Great Crusade. They were deliberately, systematically removed from existence. Every record destroyed, every statue toppled. Even their brother Primarchs who fought alongside them were bound by the Emperor himself to eternal silence about what happened. That's not incompetence. That's intentional suppression of something so terrible it had to be hidden forever. We know they existed. Documents confirm they were found, met their brothers, and led their legions for years during the Great Crusade. Statues once stood for them in the Imperial Palace on Terra, now just empty plinths, gaps in the lineup like missing teeth. Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's right hand, once remarked that the Emperor should have made all the Primarch sisters instead of brothers. Was he referring to these two? What could they have done that was worse than half their brothers turning to chaos? The Rangdan connection deepens the mystery. Between 860 and 890 M30 during the Great Crusade, the Imperium faced the Rangdan Xenocides, a series of conflicts so devastating they nearly destroyed humanity's expansion into the stars. These weren't ordinary Xenos. The Rangdan Cerebrors were technologically advanced, mind-controlling entities that rival anything the Dark Age of technology produced. They fielded war moons the size of small planets, crewed by thousands of enslaved species, each one powerful enough to match entire Imperial fleets. The Imperium threw 9 Space Marine legions at the Rangdan. Over 80,000 Astartes died. Entire expeditionary fleets vanished without a single survivor. Dozens of Titan legions were obliterated. And according to recently discovered documents, specifically a field guide issued to Solar Auxilia troops, the 2nd and 11th legions were explicitly deployed against the Rangdan threat. Then they disappeared completely. Their brother legions, the Dark Angels and Space Wolves, conducted the final Xenocide, a decade-long biopogrom that scoured every Rangdan world clean. The Dark Angels lost so many battle brothers they fell from being the largest legion to a fraction of their strength, allowing the Ultramarines to claim that title. The Space Wolves earned their grim nickname during this period, the Emperor's Executioners. The Dark Angels got a less well-known but equally chilling title of the Emperor's Exterminators. Think about that. Executioners and Exterminators. These weren't just battlefield titles. They suggest systematic elimination. Of what? Of whom? Theory suggests one or both of the Lost Primarchs fell to Rangdan corruption. Or perhaps they advocated cooperation with the Xenos in desperation, as the Imperium teetered on the brink of annihilation. The Emperor may have had no choice but to personally sanction their execution and the destruction of their entire legions. Some survivors from the Lost Legions may have been quietly redistributed. The Ultramarines and Imperial Fists both showed suspicious growth during this period, which might explain their unusually large numbers. But the rest? Purge. And whatever knowledge they possess, whatever they saw or became, died with them. Here's the truly chilling part. Whatever happened was deemed worse than treason, worse than chaos corruption. When Horus turned half the Imperium against the Emperor, when 9 Primarchs embraced demonic power and burned entire sectors, that wasn't enough to break the silence about Legions 2 and 11. Even in the Horus Heresy's darkest moments, not one Primarch spoke the names of their lost brothers. That's how terrible their fate must have been. The Emperor's bargain at Moloch. During the Dark Age of technology, before the Emperor revealed himself to unite Terra, he traveled to the night world of Moloch. He didn't go alone. Several perpetuals, immortal humans like himself, accompanied him, including a woman named Olivia Surica. They traveled in a one-way spacecraft which tells you everything about the mission's gravity. This wasn't a diplomatic visit. This was a one-way trip to something so important the Emperor couldn't risk waiting for a return vessel. On Moloch, they found something extraordinary. An ancient warp gate, not a minor rift or temporary breach, but a permanent portal leading directly into the realm of chaos, the heart of the Immaterium, the domain of the chaos gods themselves. The Emperor entered this gate alone, leaving his perpetual companions behind. What happened inside remains one of the setting's most debated mysteries, but we know what came out. The Emperor emerged with knowledge and power he didn't possess before, specifically the knowledge to create the Primarchs. According to demon testimony, admittedly not the most reliable source, the Emperor made a bargain with all 4 Chaos Gods. In exchange for the secrets of imbuing warp power into physical beings, he promised them something. We don't know what. The Emperor was already the most powerful psyker in human history, already effectively immortal, already capable of feats beyond comprehension. But creating beings like the Primarchs required more than genetics and technology. It required manipulating the fundamental forces of the warp itself. Here's where it gets murky. Did the Emperor gain power from chaos or just knowledge? The debate rages among lore scholars. Some argue the Emperor was already strong enough to rival the Chaos Gods individually. He didn't need their power. He needed their expertise in crafting souls, in binding warp energy to physical forms, in creating beings that could walk in both realms simultaneously. Others contend that some measure of the Chaos Gods' essence went into the Primarchs, which would explain their later corruption. What we know for certain is that the Emperor never intended to honor his side of the bargain. He left Olivia Surica on Moloch as a guardian, instructing her to seal the gate if it was ever threatened. Then he returned to Terra and created the Primarchs using his newly acquired knowledge. The Chaos Gods, realizing they'd been tricked, enacted their revenge. They couldn't touch the Emperor directly. He was and is the anathema, the metaphysical opposite of everything chaos represents, so they struck at his children instead. The Primarchs were scattered across the galaxy while still in their gestation pods, stolen from beneath the Himalayan mountains in the Emperor's secret laboratories. Each landed on a different world, raised in different conditions, shaped by experiences the Emperor never intended. Some thrived. Others suffered horrors that would define their character forever, and the Chaos Gods waited, knowing that half these sons would eventually return to them. But here's the really fascinating theory. Some scholars believe the Emperor wanted this to happen, that Moloch wasn't just about the Primarchs, it was the ultimate test. Consider the evidence. During the Great Crusade, the Emperor personally brought 4 Primarchs to Moloch: Lionel Johnson, Jagatai Khan, Fulgrim, and Horus Lupercal himself. He spent over 100 days there with them. Then he used his psychic might to erase every memory of Moloch from their minds and the minds of everyone who accompanied them. Why? If you wanted to hide a secret, why bring your most important generals to the very place that secret originated? Why not simply never mention Moloch at all, unless you wanted someone to eventually remember, to investigate, to discover what you did? The Emperor established the Knights of House Divine as guardians of Moloch, fortified it extensively, but he didn't seal the gate. He left it active, guarded, yes, hidden, yes, but still functioning. When Horus fell to chaos and learned of Moloch, he led a massive assault on the world, fought through the defenses, reached the gate, and entered it just as his father had done millennia before. When Horus emerged, he claimed to be imbued with the power of all 4 Chaos Gods, ascended to a level where he could genuinely threaten the Emperor. Was this what the Emperor anticipated? Did he lay a trap spanning thousands of years, knowing one of his sons would fall, knowing they would seek the same power he once claimed, using Moloch as the linchpin of some incomprehensible strategy? The alternative is that the Emperor, for all his power and foresight, simply failed to properly cover his tracks. That Horus discovered Moloch through chaos revelation, and the Emperor's grand design crumbled because he didn't seal one gate or kill everyone who knew about it. Which is more terrifying, an emperor playing 4-dimensional chess with chaos itself, or an emperor who made a critical mistake that doomed his imperium? We still don't know. What we do know is that the emperor's willingness to bargain with the ruinous powers reveals something about his character. He wasn't the righteous guardian humanity believed him to be. He was pragmatic to the point of ruthlessness. If dealing with literal embodiments of evil served his purpose, he'd do it without hesitation. The Primarchs themselves carry this taint, not genetic corruption necessarily, but the fundamental truth that their creation involved a pact with humanity's greatest enemies. Every Space Marine is descended from that bargain. Every chapter carries its echo, the Emperor's true origins. Who is the Emperor? Not what he became, but what he was. Where did he come from? The answer depends on which sources you trust, and trust is a rare commodity in the 41st millennium. The oldest lore tells a story from the dawn of human civilization. 8,000 years before the Common Era, in ancient Anatolia, what we'd call Turkey today, humanity was guided by shamans. These weren't simple mystics or frauds. They were genuine psychers, the first of their kind, able to tap into the nascent power of the warp. When they died, their souls would reincarnate, allowing them to guide humanity across generations with accumulated wisdom. But something changed. The warp was becoming turbulent. Predatory entities began forming in the immaterium, drawn by the growing violence and ambition of human civilization. Shamans who died found their souls devoured before they could reincarnate. The wisest among them realized humanity was doomed without intervention, so they conceived a desperate plan. Thousands of remaining shamans gathered in one place. They performed a mass ritual suicide, poisoning themselves simultaneously. But instead of each soul attempting to reincarnate individually, they merged. Thousands of souls, thousands of lifetimes of knowledge and power fused into a single entity in the warp. Then that entity found a host. A child was born in Anatolia around 8000 BCE. And that child carried the collective consciousness of humanity's greatest psychers, the new man, the one who would become the emperor. It's a beautiful story. It frames the emperor as humanity's collective guardian, literally composed of our noblest protectors, sacrificing themselves to create a being capable of guiding us through the darkness ahead. There's just one problem. More recent lore contradicts almost all of it. Modern sources emphasize that the emperor is a perpetual, one of a handful of immortal humans who have existed since prehistory. Perpetuals don't just live forever, they regenerate from virtually any injury, can't truly die, and accumulate knowledge over millennia. We know of several. Olennius Person, who served as the emperor's war master in ancient times. Olivia Sureka, who guarded the Moloch Gate. Irda, who later betrayed the emperor and scattered the Primarchs. John Grammaticus. These beings walked through human history, shaping events from the shadows. The emperor was one of them. Not necessarily the first, not necessarily the most powerful initially, but definitely the most ambitious. According to his own accounts, filtered through the recollection of his sons, he witnessed his uncle murder his father when he was a child. He retaliated by using psychic power to kill his uncle. That means he had his abilities from birth, not from a fusion of shaman souls. He was already what he was. Over the millennia, he accumulated power and knowledge. He knew the ancient perpetual Irda when she was already ancient. He formed and broke alliances with other immortals. In one account, he and Olennius Person besieged a tower controlled by the cult of the Cognidae in East Phoenicia, a tower covered in Enuncia, the true language of creation itself, and bleeding warp corruption. Olennius wanted it destroyed. The emperor wanted to preserve the knowledge. They fought. Olennius stabbed the emperor and used Enuncia to destroy the tower and escape. Think about that timeline. This happened before recorded history, and it shows the emperor was already pursuing dangerous knowledge and willing to betray his closest allies to get it. So which version is true? Was he born from shaman sacrifice, or is he an ancient perpetual who simply became more powerful over time? Here's where it gets complicated. Both could be partially true. The emperor himself has said, according to Magnus the Red, that ancient shamans existed and could read ley lines of warp power through Terra. Maybe the shamans didn't create him. Maybe they empowered him. Maybe a young perpetual with immense potential underwent a ritual that granted him the collected wisdom and power of thousands of psychers. Or maybe it's all propaganda. Certain sources from the Horus heresy, particularly from Belisarius Caul's encounters with the Pharos device, suggest something else entirely. A Cetan shard, one of the broken star gods, refers to the emperor as a weapon. Not a natural evolution, not a fusion of souls. A weapon. Created during the dark age of technology by unknown hands for unknown purposes. A weapon that broke free of its constraints and now pursues its own agenda. This interpretation casts everything in a different light. If the Emperor is a weapon from humanity's technological zenith, it explains his genetic mastery, his understanding of the Mechanicum's mysteries, his ability to create the Primarchs even before Moloch. It also means he might not be serving humanity's interests at all. He might be following programming, protocols, directives set by creators who died 20,000 years ago. The truth is, we don't know. The Emperor has lived for so long, appeared as so many different people, told so many stories about himself that separating fact from fiction is impossible. According to some accounts, he was Alexander the Great, though that's disputed. Other theories place him as other historical figures, though nothing's confirmed. What we do know is that he remained in the shadows for most of human history, manipulating events subtly, never revealing his true power until the Age of Strife forced his hand. Why? If he was always this powerful, why wait? Why let humanity suffer through so night? The rebellion of the Men of Iron, the collapse of the first human empire. One possibility, he was waiting for the right moment. The age of strife, terrible as it was, cleared the board. It destroyed the Ancien regime, wiped out competing power structures, and left humanity desperate for a savior. Perfect conditions for a grand entrance. Another possibility, he wasn't strong enough yet. Perhaps Moloch wasn't just about the Primarchs. Perhaps he needed that bargain to ascend to his full power. Or maybe, and this is darkest, he caused it. The Emperor is anathema to chaos. His very existence weakens the chaos gods. What if his emergence into public life, his unification of Terra, was what triggered the warp storms that ended the Dark Age? What if he deliberately collapsed humanity's golden age to position himself as our only hope? His origins matter because they determine his legitimacy. If he's humanity's collective guardian, then the imperial cult is justified. He deserves worship. If he's an ancient perpetual with his own agenda, then he's a tyrant with good publicity. If he's a weapon from the Dark Age, then everything he's built might be serving purposes we can't understand. The question of who the Emperor is determines whether the Imperium is humanity's salvation or its greatest mistake. The War in Heaven. 60 million years before the 41st millennium, before humans existed, before the Eldar Empire rose, even before most stars in the galaxy had formed, a war consumed reality. Not a war for territory or resources. A war between gods for control of existence itself. This was the War in Heaven, and everything, absolutely everything, in Warhammer 40k traces back to this ancient cataclysm. Two factions dominated the galaxy. The old ones were an ancient species, possibly reptilian, definitely the first to achieve sentience and master interstellar travel. They understood the warp on a fundamental level, could manipulate alternate dimensions, and created the webway, the network of protected tunnels through the immaterium that the Eldar would later claim as their own. They were slow, patient, deliberate. They seeded planets with life, uplifted primitive species, and shaped the galaxy according to their vision. They were as close to benevolent gods as the universe has ever known. The Necrontyr were their opposite, a species cursed by their own sun's radiation, dying of cancer and disease from childhood. Their lives were brutal and short. They looked at the Old Ones' immortality with desperate envy. When they begged the Old Ones to share the secret of eternal life, they were refused. Maybe the Old Ones couldn't help. Maybe they wouldn't. Either way, the Necrontyr declared war. They lost, badly. The Old Ones' mastery of the webway gave them an insurmountable advantage. They could strike anywhere, retreat before the Necrontyr could respond, and the Necrontyr couldn't follow. The species that would become the Necrons were driven to the edge of extinction, clinging to life in the galactic rim, their empire fragmenting into civil war. They needed a miracle. They found something worse. The Citan, star gods, entities of living energy that had existed since the universe's formation, feeding on stellar radiation. The Necrontyr discovered them, gave them bodies of living metal, necrodermis, and woke them to full consciousness. Beings like the Nightbringer, the Deceiver, the Dragon, and dozens more. The Citan promised the Necrontyr exactly what they wanted, immortality and victory over their old ones. And they delivered, sort of. The Deceiver, most cunning of the Citan, offered the Necrontyr a bargain. Undergo biotransference. Transfer your consciousness from your dying flesh into bodies of living metal. Become immortal. Become strong enough to defeat the old ones. The Necrontyr agreed. Every single one of them entered the furnaces. What emerged were the Necrons. Soulless constructs, their individuality stripped away, their emotions gone, reduced to perfect warriors. The Citan had tricked them into becoming slaves, but from the Citan's perspective, the bargain was fair. They'd promised immortality and victory. They just hadn't mentioned the cost. Now armed with legions of tireless, deathless soldiers and wielding the reality-bending powers of the Citan, the Necrons resumed the war, and this time they won. The second phase of the War in Heaven was apocalyptic. The Necrons breached the webway using Daemon gates, assaulting the old ones in their own sanctuary. Planets were razed, stars were extinguished, entire solar systems were devoured by artificial black holes summoned by Citan power. The old ones' carefully cultivated paradise became a charnel house. Their ancient fortresses, thought impregnable, fell one by one. The Citan, glutted on the life energy of conquered species, grew ever stronger. In desperation, the old ones played their final card. They began creating new warrior races, species specifically designed to fight the Necrons. The Eldar were born, psychically potent and graceful. The Krork, what would degrade over millions of years into orcs, were created as brutal, resilient soldiers who could match Necron warriors in close combat. The Jokero, the Knip, the Rashan, and countless other species. Each one a weapon aimed at the Necron legions. It worked. The The psychically active races could fight the Citan on terms the Necrons couldn't match. Warp-based attacks bypassed the Necrons' metal bodies and damaged the Citan's essence. For the first time since biotransference, the Necrons faced defeat, but the Old Ones had made a critical error. By creating so many psychically active species and throwing them into a galactic war, they flooded the warp with powerful emotions: fear, rage, despair, hope, love, and hate on a cosmic scale. The warp couldn't contain it. Entities began forming in the immaterium, coalescing from the psychic runoff of quadrillions of deaths. The first chaos gods were born, not in their current forms, but as primordial forces of destruction. The enslaver plague followed. Warp predators that possessed psychers and used them to create portals, allowing more demons to flood through. The Old Ones' greatest weapons turned against them. Their psycho species became doorways for their doom. The war in heaven ended in mutual annihilation. The Old Ones were destroyed, either going extinct or fleeing the galaxy entirely. Their last survivors were hunted down by the Citan and Necrons. But the Citan had grown arrogant. They turned on each other, the greatest among them devouring the weakest. This was the moment Sharek, the silent king of the Necrons, had been waiting for. With the Old Ones defeated and the Citan weakened by infighting, he ordered the Necrons to rebel. The Necrons shattered their former masters. Using weapons that focused the unimaginable energies of the living universe, they broke the Citan into fragments, Citan shards, and imprisoned them in tesseract labyrinths. The star gods who had ruled the material universe were reduced to weapons to be wielded by their former slaves. But the victory was Pyrrhic. The Necrons had lost trillions in the rebellion and millions more fighting the Old Ones. The galaxy was infested with enslavers and proto-demons. The Eldar, having survived the war relatively intact, would inherit the galaxy. Sharek made the final call. The Necrons would enter the Great Sleep. They built tomb complexes across millions of worlds, lay down in stasis crypts, and set timers for 60 million years. Let the flesh beings have their time. Eventually they would fall, and when the galaxy was ripe again, the Necrons would wake and reclaim what was theirs. That's the broad strokes, but the war in heaven left mysteries that echo through the present. What exactly happened to the Old Ones? Some believe they went extinct. Others suggest they fled to other galaxies or retreated into pocket dimensions. A few theories propose they still exist, hidden, watching, waiting. What were they really? Were they benevolent guardians or just another empire building weapons? What about the war between the Citan and Old Ones that the Deceiver mentioned? The one that supposedly happened before the Necrontyr even existed. Was that true? Or another of the Deceiver's lies? If true, what could a war between star gods and reality-shaping ancients have looked like? What weapons did they create? What knowledge was lost? The war in heaven fundamentally changed reality. Before it, the warp was relatively calm. After it, the warp became the nightmare we know in the 41st millennium. The war birthed chaos. It created the conditions that would eventually lead to the fall of the Eldar and the birth of Slaanesh. It left behind technology so advanced that the Adeptus Mechanicus treats Dark Age human tech as holy relics, and even that doesn't compare to what the Old Ones and Citan were capable of. The Necrons are waking up now. Not all of them. Many tomb worlds were damaged, their occupants degraded to mindless automatons. But some Necron lords remember. They remember the war in heaven. They remember what they lost. And they have intimate knowledge of technologies that make the Imperium's greatest weapons look like clubs. Figures like Trazen the Infinite collect artifacts from that ancient era. The Silent King himself has returned from his self-imposed exile beyond the galaxy, seeing threats that make him believe the Necrons must rise again. This matters because history is repeating. The Imperium created the Primarchs and Space Marines, genetic weapons meant to conquer the galaxy. The Old Ones created the Eldar and Krork for the same reason. The Emperor's bargain at Moloch mirrors the Necrontyr's bargain with the Citan. Power gained through deals with entities beyond comprehension. Chaos exists because of the war in heaven. The Tyranids are coming because the Astronomicon is screaming into the void like the psychic warfare of 60 million years ago. We're watching the same cycles repeat: God's war, mortals suffer, and the galaxy burns. The Terminus decree, recently revealed. For years, it was one of the most tantalizing mysteries in 40k lore. Deep within the chambers of purity on Titan, in the fortress monastery of the Grey Knights, locked in the chamber said to hold the tomb of Malkador the Sigillite himself, rests a simple wooden box. No gold. No ornamentation except for a single golden seal. Inside that box is a piece of ancient parchment containing instructions known only as the Terminus Decree, Only the Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights knows how to open the box. The decree is to be enacted only when all hope for the future of humanity seems lost. It's the ultimate sanction, a secret so vast it could destroy the foundation of the Imperium or provide salvation in its darkest hour. The golden seal on the box, it's an exact match for another seal found in only one other place in all the Imperium, on the Emperor's golden throne itself. For years, fans speculated wildly. Would it summon some ancient power to defeat chaos, purge the warp of the Chaos Gods entirely, free the Emperor's soul for rebirth, triggering the prophecy of the Star Child, turn off the golden throne and allow the Emperor's spirit to ascend, unite all of humanity's psychic might into a single weapon? The mystery was beautiful because it could be anything. Then Games Workshop released the 10th edition Grey Knights Codex in 2025, and they told us, the Terminus Decree states that the Emperor must never be allowed to leave the Golden Throne, not return to life, not reborn in another body, not ascended as some kind of warp entity. If any of these things happen, the Grey Knights must return him to his terrible duty by any means necessary, even if it means fighting through the Adeptus Custodes themselves to do it. The fan reaction was immediate and divisive. Some celebrated finally having an answer. Others mourned the loss of mystery, arguing that speculation was more satisfying than any answer could be. But focus on what this reveals rather than what it removes. The Terminus Decree tells us something profound about the Emperor's character and his self-awareness. The Emperor, before being entombed on the Golden Throne, recognized he might not stay there forever. More importantly, he recognized that if he ever left, through resurrection, rebirth, or ascension, it might not truly be him anymore. Or worse, it would be him, but corrupted by 10,000 years of worship, agony, and contact with the warp. He wrote this decree as insurance against his own transformation into something terrible. This connects directly to events during the Siege of Terra. In the novel The End and the Death, we learn the Emperor nearly ascended during his battle with Horus, not to become a benevolent god, but to become the Dark King, a fifth Chaos God, dedicated to total annihilation. The Emperor was drawing on warp power so vast, preparing to ascend to such heights that he would have destroyed the galaxy to win. Hellenius Person, the ancient perpetual, and the Emperor's former friend, confronted him, convinced him to abandon that power and face Horus as something closer to mortal. Ollanius paid for that intervention with his life. Horus destroyed him so utterly that even his perpetual immortality couldn't save him. But his sacrifice worked. The Emperor found another way. He defeated Horus without fully ascending. But the temptation had been there. The capacity for that transformation exists within him. The Terminus Decree acknowledges this. 10,000 years have passed since then. The Emperor sits on the Golden Throne in a state between life and death. 1,000 psychers are sacrificed daily to maintain his existence. The Astronomicon burns with his power, guiding ships through the warp. But he's also been exposed to the faith of quintillions of humans across the Imperium who worship him as a god. He explicitly forbade worship during his mortal life. Now he's drowning in it. That much belief, that much worship has power in the warp. It shapes reality. Is the current Emperor still the man who unified Terra? Or has he been transformed by 10 millennia of veneration into something else? The God Emperor that the ecclesiarchy worships may be more real than they know, and not in a good way. Living saints manifest his power. Miracles occur in his name. He acts through his servants in ways that transcend what a barely living corpse should be able to do. Maybe he's ascending gradually, unintentionally, unavoidably. The Terminus Decree exists to stop that. If the Emperor rises from the Golden Throne, whether through his own will, external intervention, or complete ascension into the warp, the Grey Knights must act. They must force him back. They must re-entomb him, even if it means fighting through the 10,000 custodians who guard him, even if it means potentially killing what remains of humanity's greatest protector. The decree doesn't provide instructions on how to accomplish this, just the mandate that it must be done. How do you force a god-level psyker back onto a throne when he's powerful enough to will entire armies out of existence? How do you fight through the custodians, who are individually more powerful than Grey Knights? What if the Emperor doesn't want to go back? What if his ascension would actually save humanity? And the decree is based on outdated fears. These are questions the Grey Knights will have to answer themselves if the moment comes. And according to recent lore, with the opening of the Great Rift and the galaxy torn in half, Kaldor Drago and the other Grandmasters are supposedly considering whether that moment has arrived. The Emperor's presence in the warp has grown stronger. Strange phenomena occur near Terra. Living saints manifest with increasing frequency. Something is changing. This sets up a potential galaxy-ending conflict. On one side, the Grey Knights, humanity's demon hunters, following their founder's decree. On the other, the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guard, who exists solely to protect him. In the middle, Robert Guilliman, who has spoken with the Emperor and whose accounts suggest his father may no longer be the man he knew. What happens when the Imperium's most elite forces are ordered to stop the Emperor himself? The Terminus Decree also connects to other mysteries. The Star Child prophecy from old lore suggested the Emperor's soul would eventually be reborn, leading humanity to a new golden age. Is the Terminus Decree meant to prevent this? Does the Emperor believe his own rebirth would be catastrophic? Or is this about something else entirely? About keeping him on the throne because the moment he leaves, the webway breach beneath the Imperial Palace will flood Terra with demons. The Golden Throne isn't just life support, it's a seal on a wound in reality. If he leaves, does Terra fall? Some fans see this as Games Workshop closing off a narrative possibility, ensuring the Emperor never advances the plot by leaving the throne. Others see it as setup for exactly that storyline. Why reveal this now unless they're building toward it? The Terminus Decree was a mystery for over a decade. They chose to reveal it precisely when the setting is undergoing its biggest changes in 40 years. That's not coincidence. Whether you like the revelation or not, it adds depth to the Emperor's character. He wasn't just a tyrant who believed he knew best. He was self-aware enough to recognize his own capacity for corruption. He understood that power corrupts, that worship changes you, that 10,000 years of psychic torture might transform him into something that would doom humanity rather than save it. The Terminus Decree is the act of a man who doesn't trust his own future self, and in the grim darkness of the far future, that might be the wisest thing he ever did. The Rangdan Xenocides, the Forgotten Horror. The Horus Heresy nearly destroyed the Imperium. Half the Space Marine legions turned traitor. Terra itself was besieged. The Emperor was mortally wounded. It's the defining tragedy of the setting, the event that shaped everything that followed. But it wasn't the worst conflict of the Great Crusade, not even close. That distinction belongs to the Rangdan Xenocides, a series of wars so devastating that their very records were deliberately destroyed. Between 860 and 890 M30, as the Great Crusade pushed into the eastern fringe and toward the Halo stars, the Imperium encountered the Rangdan Terrorvores. We know almost nothing about them because the Dark Angels systematically erased their existence from history. No images survive, few descriptions remain. What we do know paints a picture of cosmic horror. They were lithe yet towering, vaguely vulpine in appearance, but possessed mimicry abilities that allowed them to appear as other species. They were technologically advanced enough to rival the dark age of technology. They could control minds. They enslaved entire species to use as shock troops, and they wanted the galaxy just as badly as the Emperor did. The first Rangdan Xenocide began at Advex Moors. The Dark Angels, the Ist Legion, engaged the Rangdan and lost 5,000 battle brothers in 4 months. 5,000. That's more starts than some entire chapters in the 41st millennium, and that was just first contact. The Rangdan fought with armies of enslaved species, wearing down Imperial forces before their own warriors even engaged. When they did fight directly, individual Rangdan warriors could kill Space Marines in close combat. Their spacecraft jellyfish-shaped things wielded shadow blasters that vaporized fortifications and soldiers alike. The second Rangdan Xenocide nearly ended the Imperium. The Rangdan launched a massive invasion with war moons, planet-sized vessels manned by thousands of mind-controlled slaves. A single war moon could match an entire Imperial fleet in firepower. During the Battle of Advex Moors, one war moon held off 3 Gloriana-class battleships, the largest, most powerful warships the Imperium possessed. The Imperium only won by sacrificing one of those irreplaceable vessels. The Imperium threw 9 Space Marine legions at the Rangdan threat. 9. The Dark Angels, White Scars, Space Wolves, Death Guard, Raven Guard, and the now lost 2nd and 11th Legions, plus elements of others. Even this wasn't enough. Whole expeditionary fleets vanished without a single survivor. Dozens of Titan legions were obliterated. Millions of Imperial Army troops died. The White Scars and Raven Guard held the Forge world of Zana for 8 months, losing 3,000 Astartes just to maintain the defensive line until reinforcements arrived. The casualties would not be exceeded until the Horus Heresy itself. By the time the second Xenocide ended, over 80,000 Space Marines were dead. The Dark Angels were reduced from 100,000 legionaries to a fraction of that number. Some sources claim as few as 10,000 survived. They lost their status as the largest legion. The Ultramarines claimed that title, suspiciously growing during this period. Where did those new recruits come from? Were they redistributed survivors from the lost legions? The third Rangdan Xenocide was different. The surviving Rangdan had retreated to their home worlds, wounded but not defeated. They grew strong strong again, nourished by hatred. White Scar Scouts accidentally discovered their nest in 887 M30. Lionel Johnson and Lehman Russ, often antagonistic rivals, united for one purpose: total extermination. What followed was a decade-long biopogrom. Not just battles, not conquest. Systematic sterilization of every world the Rangdan had touched. The Space Wolves and Dark Angels scoured entire sectors clean. Any world tainted by Rangdan influence, including Imperial worlds, was cleansed. We're talking about virus bombing, orbital bombardment, and ground extermination campaigns that left nothing alive. Survivors were sworn to silence or eliminated. The Rangdan had to vanish completely from history. The Dark Angels established the Order of Broken Claws to study the Rangdan and watch for their return, but publicly it was as if they'd never existed. The Space Wolves earned their title during this period: the Emperor's Executioners. The Dark Angels got theirs: the Emperor's Exterminators. These aren't metaphors. These are job descriptions. And here's the critical question: who were they executing? Certainly the Rangdan, but something more. Those titles suggest they kill their own brothers, legions, Primarchs. The timing of the lost Primarch's disappearance matches the Rangdan genocides perfectly. Newly discovered documents, a field guide issued to Solar Auxilia troops, explicitly mention the 2nd and 11th Legions participating in the Rangdan campaigns. Then they vanished from all records. What happened? The prevailing theory is that one or both Primarchs fell to Rangdan corruption. Perhaps the mind control affected them. Perhaps they advocated cooperation with Xenos in desperation as the Imperium teetered on collapse. Perhaps they saw something in the Rangdan that changed them fundamentally. The Emperor may have had no choice but to sanction their execution. And if the Emperor himself ordered a Primarch's death, who would he trust to carry it out? His executioners and exterminators, Lehman Russ and Lionel Johnson, the very same Primarchs who led the final biopogrom against the Rangdan, the same two who have always been cagey about the fates of their lost brothers, the same ones who know the weight of doing terrible things for the Imperium's survival. Here's what makes the Rangdan genocides truly horrifying. They're forgotten. The Horus Heresy is remembered, studied, obsessed over by Imperial scholars. The Rangdan genocides were deliberately erased. Why? What did the Imperium encounter in the Halo stars that was so terrible it had to be hidden from history? What did the Rangdan do or become that justified not just their extermination, but the extermination of all knowledge about them? The Order of Broken Claws still exists in the 41st millennium, 10,000 years later, stationed at Advex Moors and watching for signs of the Rangdan's return. They guard relics associated with the Xenos. They maintain vigilance. This implies the Imperium isn't certain the Rangdan are truly extinct. Maybe some escaped beyond the galaxy's edge. Maybe their true homeworld was never found. Maybe something of them survived, dormant, waiting. This matters because it demonstrates the Imperium has faced existential threats beyond chaos. The Rangdan nearly won. They matched the Imperium's technology, exceeded it in some areas, and could corrupt or control Imperial forces. They forced the Emperor to make unthinkable sacrifices. They may have cost him 2 of his sons, and we don't even know what they really wanted or where they came from. The galaxy is vast. The Halo stars are barely explored in the 41st millennium. What else is out there? What other horrors exist beyond known space? The Rangdan genocides suggest that chaos isn't the only thing that can end humanity. There are alien threats with capabilities that rival or exceed the Imperium's finest weapons, and the fact that this was hidden rather than remembered suggests the Imperium fears knowledge of the Rangdan more than it fears the memory of defeat. In a setting defined by knowledge, where ignorance is survival and curiosity is heresy, the Rangdan genocides are the ultimate validation of the philosophy. Some things are too terrible to remember, some enemies are too dangerous to study, and some victories cost so much that they're indistinguishable from defeat. The Tyranid hive mind and the Shadow in the Warp. The Tyranids are different from every other threat in Warhammer 40k. Chaos can be fought, its champions can be killed, its corruption can be resisted. Orcs can be defeated in battle. Eldar can be reasoned with, or at least predicted. Necrons can be destroyed or put back to sleep. But the Tyranids, there's something else entirely. An extragalactic swarm with one purpose: consume. And at the center of it all is the most alien intelligence in the setting, the hive mind. The hive mind is a Gestalt psychic consciousness that controls every Tyranid organism in existence, not like a general commanding troops or a hive mind composed of individuals. This is billions upon billions of creatures functioning as cells in a single vast intelligence that exists primarily in the warp. It's so massive, so complex, so utterly foreign to human thought that almost every psyker who tries to perceive it directly either dies or goes irrevocably insane. Their mind simply can't process what they're experiencing. Chief Librarian Tigurius of the Ultramarines is the only confirmed human to have touched the hive mind and retained his sanity. He makes eerily accurate predictions about Tyranid movements and intentions, suggesting he's somehow maintained a connection to that impossible consciousness. This should require power equivalent to the Emperor's. The fact that Tigurius managed it speaks either to his incredible gift or to something deeply wrong with what he's touching. Maybe the hive mind allows him this connection. Maybe it's studying him through their link just as he studies it. When a hive fleet approaches a target world, it brings the shadow in the warp. This isn't just a metaphor. It's a tangible phenomenon that makes warp travel and communication impossible. The Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that guides ships across the Imperium, is drowned out by the hive mind's presence. Astropaths trying to send messages through the shadow report, hearing chittering, screaming, an endless cacophony of alien voices that drives them to smash their heads against walls until the voices stop. Navigators go blind staring into it, their third eye overwhelmed by something that shouldn't exist in the warp but does. For psychers, the shadow in the warp is existential horror. Imagine being telepathic and suddenly feeling something vast and hungry thinking at you. Not words, not concepts you can understand, just awareness. It knows you exist. It's interested in you the way we might be interested in a particularly interesting bacteria under a microscope. And you can't escape because it's everywhere and nowhere, permeating the warp itself. Psychers suffer debilitating headaches, uncontrollable screaming, bleeding from the eyes and ears. Using their powers in proximity to the shadow can trigger catastrophic psychosis. The warp, already dangerous, becomes utterly lethal. This has massive strategic implications. A world under attack by Tyranids can't call for help. The shadow blocks astropathic communication. Ships in the warp near a hive fleet are forcibly dragged back into real space. Reinforcements can't arrive. The defenders are alone, isolated, fighting an enemy that grows stronger with every casualty because the Tyranids reclaim all biological matter from the dead, including their own losses. Every battle is fought with the knowledge that no one is coming. No one even knows you're dying. Here's where it gets deeply weird. The Tyranids shouldn't be able to exist as they do. They're intensely psychic. The hive mind is one of the most powerful psychic entities in the galaxy. By all logic, they should attract chaos like a beacon. Demons should manifest around them constantly. The chaos gods should be able to corrupt them, but they don't. The lore explicitly states that Tyranids have cold voids in place of their souls. They're psychically active but somehow soulless. This might mean they genuinely don't have what we'd recognize as souls, or it might mean their souls are so alien that chaos can't get purchase on them. The shadow in the warp might actually repel chaos. Where a hive fleet passes, demonic manifestation becomes more difficult. Some theorize the shadow isn't just a side effect of the hive mind's presence but a defensive weapon. If chaos needs souls to sustain itself, and Tyranids are harvesting all biological matter in the galaxy, then the Tyranids are effectively starving chaos. An empty galaxy is one where the chaos gods have no power. Is that the hive mind strategy? Consume everything, leave the chaos gods to wither in an empty universe? But that raises the biggest question of all. Where do the Tyranids come from? They originated outside the Milky Way galaxy. We know this. Multiple hive fleets are approaching from different directions in intergalactic space, which means they've been traveling for potentially millions of years through the void between galaxies. Why? What drove them here? What are they fleeing or hunting? Several theories exist. First, they're fleeing something worse. Another threat in their home galaxy drove them out. If the Tyranids, who can consume entire galaxies, are refugees from something even more terrifying, what could that possibly be? Second, they were created. The old ones made warrior races. Maybe in another galaxy, another ancient faction created the Tyranids as the ultimate biological weapon, and that weapon escaped control. Third, they're natural, apex predators on a galactic scale, evolved over billions of years to consume and adapt. The hive mind could be a genuine evolutionary development, a consciousness that emerged from simpler organisms over incomprehensible timescales. Fourth and darkest, the hive mind is a chaos god from another galaxy. If the chaos gods as we know them are psychic entities formed from the thoughts and emotions of our galaxy's sentient species, why couldn't similar entities exist elsewhere? The hive mind could be the gestalt consciousness of an entirely different galaxy's mortals, warped and twisted into something something that exists to consume. This theory explains why it's psychic but not corruptible by our chaos gods. It's already a warp entity, just one so alien we can't recognize it as such. There's another disturbing possibility. The Astronomicon, the Emperor's psychic beacon, has been screaming into the void for 10,000 years, calling ships home through the warp, but psychic signals don't have a range limit. That beacon has been radiating outward through space at the speed of light, expanding in a sphere 10,000 light years in radius. What if the Tyranids are moths drawn to the flame? What if the Imperium called them here? The scale of the threat can't be overstated. Multiple Hive fleets are approaching from all directions. Behemoth was the first to make major contact, smashing into the galaxy from below. Kraken followed with different strategies, splitting into multiple tendrils. Leviathan is the largest yet, a Hive fleet so massive it nearly destroyed the Blood Angels at Baal. And these are just the largest. Smaller splinter fleets probe everywhere. Each one adapts. Each one learns from defeats. The Hive mind doesn't make the same mistake twice. Every world the Tyranids consume makes them stronger. They harvest the biomass, break it down, and incorporate useful traits into new organisms. Fight them with tanks, they evolve armor-piercing weapons. Use psychers against them. They develop creatures that project the shadow more intensely. Fireworks? Next time they arrive with bioforms resistant to flame. Swords effective? They grow thicker carapaces. The Hive mind is learning, not just tactics, but fundamental biological solutions to every problem the galaxy throws at it. There's no negotiating with them, no bargaining, no understanding their demands because they don't have demands. They have hunger. They're not evil. They're not cruel. They're not even really hostile in a way that implies consciousness of us as beings worthy of consideration. We're food. The universe is food. And the Hive mind will feed until nothing remains but empty worlds and silent stars. This is what makes them the ultimate threat. Chaos needs mortals to exist. Kill all sentient life and the chaos gods starve. The Necrons want to rule the galaxy, not consume it. The Orcs want a good fight, not extinction. But the Tyranids? They don't need the galaxy to be anything other than biomass. They don't need mortals alive. They don't need civilization. They need nutrients. And when this galaxy is consumed, they'll move to the next and the next until the universe itself is just one vast Tyranid swarm in an empty void. The Hive mind is patient. The Hive mind is eternal. The Hive mind is coming. And the scariest part? We still don't know why. We don't know what it wants beyond consumption. We don't know if it's conscious in any way we'd recognize. We don't know if it has a goal beyond endless feeding. The Tyranids might be the answer to the Fermi paradox. Where are all the aliens in the universe? They were eaten. And we're next. The power of mystery. We've covered 8 of the biggest mysteries in Warhammer 40k, spanning 60 million years of history. From the war in heaven that shaped the galaxy's fundamental reality to the Tyranids approaching from beyond it. From the Emperor's ancient bargain with chaos to his contingency plan for his own corruption. From lost Primarchs erased from history to the Rangdan threat that nearly ended the Imperium before it truly began. Each mystery tells us something about what makes this setting endure. These aren't just plot holes or forgotten details. They're deliberately constructed gaps in the narrative. Games Workshop understands something crucial. Mystery is more powerful than revelation. When the Terminus Decree was finally explained, the community split. Some loved having an answer. Others felt something vital was lost. Both reactions are valid because mystery serves multiple purposes in fictional universes. First, mystery invites participation. When the lost Primarchs remain unnamed, every fan can theorize. Some think they were corrupted by Xenos. Others believe they advocated peace with aliens. Some propose they suffered genetic flaws too severe to fix. Each theory is valid because there's no canonical answer to disprove it. This transforms consumers into collaborators. You're not just reading someone else's story, you're actively building the world through speculation and debate. Second, mystery creates depth. A universe where everything is explained feels small, knowable, finished. But a universe where ancient events remain unclear, where questions span millions of years, where even the setting's god figure has an uncertain origin, that feels vast, real. The fact that we don't fully understand the war in heaven makes it more impressive. Not less. It was so long ago, so massive in scale that complete records couldn't possibly survive. The mystery validates the timeline. Third, mystery enables contradiction. Different sources give different accounts of the Emperor's origins. Is that a flaw? No, it's realistic. History is written by victors, retold by survivors, and distorted by time. The Emperor himself might tell different stories depending on his audience. Chaos entities certainly lie. Even Primarchs are unreliable narrators. This isn't sloppy world building. It's sophisticated world building that acknowledges perspective matters. But mystery as a tool has limits. The Terminus Decree reveal demonstrates this. Some mysteries are weight-bearing pillars of the setting. Remove them and the structure shifts. The decree was one such pillar. Fans had invested years in speculation. The reveal had to deliver something meaningful enough to justify ending that conversation. Games Workshop chose to make it about the Emperor's self-awareness of his potential corruption. That's thematically rich. It connects to the Dark King storyline, to the nature of worship, to questions about whether the Imperium serves humanity or enslaves it, but it also closes off certain narrative possibilities. If the decree states the Emperor must never leave the throne, does that mean he never will? Or is this foreshadowing a storyline where the Grey Knights have to enact it? The community debate now shifts from what is it to what does it mean for the future? That's still engagement, just different. The question is whether that trade was worth it. Some mysteries should probably never be fully revealed. The Lost Primarchs, for instance, any answer would disappoint someone. The power of that mystery is in its completeness. They're so thoroughly erased that even hints are rare. That's more interesting than any specific revelation about what they did. And it validates the Emperor's absolute authority and suggests horrors beyond even chaos corruption. Better to leave that space empty. Others benefit from partial revelation. The Emperor's origins have been expanded from the simple shaman story to something more complex without fully explaining him. We know more now about perpetuals, about Moloch, about his time walking through history, but we still don't know who he truly is or what he truly wants. That's the right balance. Enough information to deepen the character without removing his mystique. The War in Heaven sits in a sweet spot. We know the broad strokes. Old Ones versus Necrons and Citan. Chaos born from psychic warfare. Galaxy consumed by conflict, but the details remain hazy. What exactly were the Old Ones? Where did they go? What super weapons remain hidden? These questions don't need answers. They make the setting feel older and larger. They remind us that the current conflicts are just the latest chapter in an ancient, ongoing story. The Tyranids represent mystery of purpose. We know what they do. We see the hive mind's effects, but we don't know why they came to our galaxy or what they ultimately want. That uncertainty is existentially terrifying in the right way. It's not frustrating mystery, it's cosmic horror. The universe contains intelligences so alien we can't even understand their motivations. That's Lovecraftian in the best sense. What makes Warhammer 40k endure isn't just the battles or the factions. It's the sense that you're seeing fragments of something impossibly vast. Every codex adds pieces, every novel reveals new angles. But the full picture never quite comes into focus. That's not a flaw. That's the point. In a universe that spans galaxies and millions of years, where gods war in the warp and ancient machines wake from eons of sleep, humans should be confused. We should be struggling to understand. Our incomplete knowledge validates the setting scale. These mysteries remind us why we love this universe. It's not just grimdark for the sake of darkness, it's a setting where consequences echo across millennia, where ancient decisions shape present conflicts, where even the greatest heroes operate with incomplete information and make terrible choices because there are no good options. The Emperor's bargain at Moloch doomed the Imperium 38,000 years before the current timeline. The War in Heaven created chaos 60 million years ago. The Tyranids might be approaching because of a beacon lit 10,000 years ago. Everything connects, everything matters, everything is uncertain. Which mystery fascinates you most? Are you drawn to the personal tragedy of the Lost Primarchs or the cosmic scale of the War in Heaven? Do you want to know more about the Emperor's true nature, or would that ruin his character? Are the Tyranids more terrifying as an unexplained force, or would understanding their origin make them more compelling? These questions don't have right answers. They have your answers. And that's what makes the mysteries work. They're not puzzles to solve. They're spaces to explore. In the grim darkness of the far future, some secrets are better left buried, but that won't stop us from digging, because in a universe this dark, even fragments of truth are precious. Keep searching, keep questioning, keep diving into the lore. The Emperor protects, but knowledge empowers. And in Warhammer 40k, both are necessary for survival.